I want to say hello and welcome to the East Coast Fashion Summit. Welcome to you, Mr. Brent McCombs. Thank you for joining us today. It's
Hey, how are you doing?
good. It's great to have you. We're so happy you could be here. Yeah, cheers. um, so, you want to tell the folks at home that are watching a little bit about what you do as an editorial and fashion photographer and how you got started in that industry.
Well, I do editorial photographer, or one of the photographers for Atlantic Fashion Week. Pretty sure the longest serving one, and the guy who does a lot of the lighting, or used to anyway, before we got all fancy and had people to do it. Um, yeah, so I got into photography just after my mother passed away, about 14 years ago. Uh, I had sort of dabbled in photography for a number of years. My dad had given me a camera when I was in finishing high school. But I was the son of immigrants, and they were old school European. So, you had to be a doctor, a lawyer, an architect, or a dentist, and that was pretty much it. So that's the path I had been on. Um, and I went to law school and did all the things I was supposed to do. But when my mother got sick, I ended up shuttling between Nova Scotia and Ontario for about 18 months and taking care of her. My dad was older at the time and not able to do a lot. So I ended up spending more time I spent with my mother than probably I had since I was a baby. Um, and we talked a lot. And I learned that she didn't have a lot of regrets in life about things she had done, but she had a lot of regrets in life about things she didn't do. So I decided my parents weren't particularly wealthy. So when my mom died, she didn't have me a lot of money to give me, but I inherited almost 20 grand. It was like $19,000, and I figured that was enough to take some time off. And being an only child, my head was messed up losing my mom anyway. Um, but I decided to take some time off from my real work and try photography. I figured I'd take a year, fail, but then I wouldn't end up being 60 years old and thinking, oh, I could have been a photographer. And just to get rid of that regret was worth it. So I did that. I took a year off. I got some photo gear. I rented some space, and yeah, I met some people on the internet. I ended up doing a lot of training in Los Angeles. I ended up meeting in Halifax Steve Richard, who I ended up partnering with, learning from. And my 1 year experiment is 14 years old now. And I think it's been killed by COVID. Yeah.
Oh my god. So yeah, how do you go from bringing your concept and your because you do some really cool conceptual work. How do you take these amazing concepts and turn them into a real life photo where you're pretty proud of the result?
Well, it's different. It actually can come about in a number of different ways. When I started, it was often my ideas that I'd um, copy from the internet and try to change enough to make it my own, or I'd watch a movie and see something that inspired me. And it turned out okay. But as I've gone on and done more professional work, often the ideas come from the clients, and they're sort of my job is to take their vision and make it something as good as they imagine, or if possible, sometimes better. But a lot of times, for fashion work in particularly, it comes from a mood or an idea. Um, if you're doing a fall shoot in the woods, then you can work it a number of different ways. It can be light and effervescent and colorful. It can be dark and moody. Sometimes you have to take what you get when you go out to shoot and you plan and you have everybody organized and you're planning on doing a light effervescent shoot, but it turns out to be one of those super gray days. Well, you can try to work it, you can reschedule, or you can talk about it and go, does this work? Are we going to run with this? There's times when we plan for something that we're not willing to budge on, and Nova Scotia being Nova Scotia, it can take a while to photograph. I did an outdoor shoot with Veronica McIsaac a few years ago on the side of Citadel Hill in the snow. And we knew where we wanted to shoot, we knew what we wanted to shoot, but we needed pure snow, not walked on. And it took us probably the better part of 2 years to get a day where we were available and we could go out at like 6, 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning and get that snow and have the shoot we were looking for. Um, you don't always have that kind of flexibility to get exactly what you want. So, and if you have the budget, you just make what you want. But in Nova Scotia, we rarely have that kind of budget.
Exactly. I remember one of the photos of that shoot. I think you had Christy in the snow in the white with the blonde hair in the Veronica clothes. That was gorgeous. I remember.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through some of your planning? Are there certain details that you look for and discuss with the client to make that maybe aspiring photographers wouldn't think of, to kind of do your pre-work on, so that when you get to your shoot, you're not wasting a lot of time and light?
Yes, we storyboard a lot. We have pre pose options, usually pulled out of magazines or something like that. Sometimes it depends a lot on what kind of fashion shoot you're doing. Difference between doing a catalog fashion shoot, an editorial fashion shoot where you're trying to get one or two iconic looks, or an editorial fashion shoot where you have to run through 12, 18, 24 garments. So, and you want unique looks for each one of those. Each one of those styles of shoot requires an entirely different approach. And it can be boiled down to sometimes you accept good and move on. And sometimes good is your starting point and you refine and you refine and you refine. You take 2 or 3 hours to get the shot you want, or you have 2 or 3 hours to get 24 unique shots and you're just running and gunning and you've got 5 minutes and you go. I've done shoots like that in the UK where I had to do Google Street View walking around London, like from midnight till 4 a.m., finding locations that might work. And then the next day we have to do 15 locations separated sometimes by 3 or 4 kilometers. And we're walking or we're cabbing with a crew of 4 models, 2 production guys, my lighting guy, me, and a couple guys from an ad agency in like 2 or 3 or 4 cabs. That's a nightmare. And the coordination is crazy. But I can pull up this Google Street View. I combine that with any one of a number of iPhone apps that will tell you where the sun's going to be, and sort of in my head in about 2 minutes go, okay, I think this is a spot that'll work given that it's sunny or cloudy or whatever. Go there, see if it's going to work. If it is, pop your lights up, shoot it. If it's not, that's when you start to scramble and find something. And if you're just going for a single shot, it's easier in the sense that you can plan a location, go scouting a location. In a different thing that Veronica and I did, we went up in Cape Breton in November for a spring shoot. So we did like a 3-day scout in Cape Breton for a shoot we were doing months later. That's good. I can take iPhone snaps of the locations. We can talk about it over months and say, well, let's try to grab something here. And the designer can say, well, this is the garment we're going to do here. If you're doing something in the studio, I will often pre-light the day before, send off some samples of my set to the designer or the client and say, here's what I've pre-lit. And usually there's like mannequins and stuff in the set. And I'm like, is this what you're looking for? Or did you want the background brighter or darker? Does that look like a real jungle? Or does it look like a bunch of like plastic trees that I just had laying around? Because it is, but so it's that kind of process. On the day, I shoot tethered 99% of the time in studio, and I have an iPad, so if possible, when shooting on location, we'll transfer files to an iPad and get into a dark place if it's sunny and take a look at the images that we're creating. And if we can't review every single image, at least review sort of the overall idea. Is this sort of what we want? Yeah, all right. Now we can work it from here. Then when we're certain we've got something, pop back in. Sometimes it's just putting a sweatshirt over your head to look at the pictures. Yep, that's it. We got the shot. Let's go. I'm big on reviewing. I'm big on preparing, but my actual skill probably is adapting when things aren't going well. And it's like, all right, what do we got? So,
The whole
yeah.
with what you got situation. And I
Yeah, plan something up the wazoo, but don't be so inflexible that you can't take a moment and recognize an opportunity that's coming up. I did a shoot for a magazine 5 or 6 years ago, and we were just doing a downtown Halifax urban streetwear shoot. Nothing all that crazy. We needed to shoot, I think it was 6 looks in. We had a couple hours, so we had plenty of time, and it was all just in the downtown core. And we'd done like 3 or 4 of the shots, and then this guy comes by, like he just enters our scene, and he's got a big boom box on his shoulder, and he's like a really cool street kid, and he's just like having a blast. Now, on a closed set like that, you don't want that kind of intrusion. It's threatening to the model because he's like right up in her space, but she played off it really cool. She was like, hey, yeah, and they start dancing. And I'm like, let's shoot this, buddy. You cool with this? And he's like, oh, yeah. So we shot it. And then it became a really cool shot. Completely unplanned. I had to get him to sign a quick release, but it worked. And I have been assisting on so many fashion shoots where that guy would have gotten dragged off the set or yelled at, and there would have been a confrontation. It would have made the model uncomfortable. Everybody would have had drama. It went so much smoother just playing with it. No more than 20 minutes later, we were walking by the liquor store that's right downtown, and there was a guy sitting outside the liquor store with a giant snake. And I'm like, okay, universe, thank you again, but we worked the snake into the shot. And I'm like, all right, didn't see this coming. So our very, very, very mundane girls walking around downtown in clothing shoot had 2 very, very different, unique shots. Client loved it, magazine loved it. It turned out really good. But both of those things could have been ignored if you were just working from your plan.
yeah.
So the plan saves you when nothing else positive happens.
Yeah.
One of my shoots in Oregon for an Indian outdoor outerwear brand, they had this huge want list of things that they would really want, and it included some pretty amazing things, like they wanted helicopters and elephants, and they wanted a tiger in the shot. And so we priced all that, and you can get it brought up from California, but the prices were exceeding their budget. We had almost a $200,000 budget, but these things would have been like $60,000, $70,000 on their own. One of the things they really wanted was one of those St. Bernard dogs for a mountain shot. And we tried to find it. We could find huskies like crazy, but we couldn't find a St. Bernard. And we were shooting at this ski resort, and a guy shows up with a St. Bernard. And I saw him in the parking lot as we were shooting something about 40, 50 meters away. And my producer, Lara, was standing there, and I'm like, St. Bernard, can we get that? And she's like, oh, we can't, we've got a schedule. And I'm like, no, we're getting that. So I literally handed my camera to the model. I said, I'll be right back. And I ran down. I'm like, hey, dude, buddy, we're doing this photo shoot for this clothing brand. Would you like your dog to be in the shoot? It'd be really fun. And he's like, yeah, cool. So we got our St. Bernard for free. Yeah. Saved our budget, which was money in our pockets, and we got the St. Bernard shot. So.
And that's just you being fearless and open and looking around at your environment and not ignoring the awesome things that are happening around you. So that's great.
Yeah, it's your job as a photographer to keep your eyes open. And one of the easiest pitfalls for a photographer, which I fall victim to all the time when I'm shooting wildlife, is to get lost in your camera and lose the wider picture. I've almost been killed by a jaguar and a walrus in different places because I got so wrapped up in trying to make a good photo. I didn't realize these wild animals were like within 20 or so feet of me and coming closer. When I'm on a fashion shoot, though, I'm generally now, and it didn't used to be this way. It used to be really hard to do this because I was so caught up in trying to get exposure right and trying to pose models and trying to do all that stuff. That stuff's not that hard for me anymore, and I'm working with better people, so the models know how to pose. And now for me, it's seeing the bigger picture. And I took about 4 years of just going on workshops to learn how to do landscape photography, because I felt really comfortable in the studio, but I'd come outside and I'd be frustrated by the fact that I couldn't put a nice light on that tree over there, or have that valley a little bit dimmer. Like it would be, and I wouldn't know where to put people in a landscape shot. So I spent a fair bit of my own money, and then I got hooked up with some amazing wildlife photographers and got to go around the world with them. But I spent a long time learning how to do just landscapes. And then I started to put people in my landscape shots. And so a lot of my outdoor fashion work are landscapes that just happen to have people in the right spots. At least that's what I try to do. And I like that look.
Yeah, that's really cool. I can't believe you're so unaware you almost got eaten.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a bit, but how has COVID changed your business? And what do you think's the future of photography is going to be affected? Is everyone going to just shut it down, Brent? No.
I don't know. My fashion work took a big slowdown about 6-7 years ago when I met and married a lovely girl from Cole Harbour and decided that being out of the country 20-odd, 30-odd weeks a year was a bad idea for the relationship. And so I built and opened a studio, which last year Steve wanted to move to Toronto and the film industry wasn't paying our bills like we had hoped it was going to. So we decided to sell the studio, which we did in November. And my plan was to focus on shooting weddings for money. And I had 18 booked for this year, and only one happened. So it was a very, very unfortunate bad move financially. But it depends on what kind of photography you do. I mean, there's people who are, their real jobs are slowed down or they're working from home, so their time is freed up. I think at the amateur end, there's a lot of opportunity to go out and learn and do a lot more stuff than I had the opportunity when I was working and trying to learn photography and had to be somewhere 9 to 5 and then you're tired. I mean, that's a small silver lining. We're a little bit lucky in Nova Scotia. There's a lot of opportunity here because our rates are so low and we're allowed to do stuff. Studios can be open now. And there's a fair bit of work going on. I think I've had 6 or 7 commercial jobs since we reopened. Nothing huge, but I haven't been really pushing it. I've really kind of enjoyed being a house husband and building a lovely patio and deck, which I'm sitting on right now. Although it looks like I'm at Atlantic Fashion Week circa 2013 or something like that. But anyway, COVID is a mess and a disaster for a lot of businesses. I know that I was on the board of the PPOC, the Professional Photographers of Canada, for a couple of years, and there's a couple of board members on there who are extremely successful local portrait photographers in their areas, and their businesses are down 70-80%. Yeah, it is harsh for them. I've always had sort of a boom bust situation with my work. I'll get a commercial contract, make what feels like an egregious amount of money for a couple of weeks' work, but then be out of work for a month. The whole plan for the last 3 years is to try to stabilize that and get more consistent income. It's not working because of COVID. But I don't know. I think people are. I'm the worst person to ask about business because I'm not good at it. I'm much better at photography than I am at business. Even if you think my photography is terrible, I'm still better at it than I am at business. But yeah, I don't know. I hope it's going better for a lot of the designers and stuff. I know makeup artists are having a struggle, especially outside of Nova Scotia.
Yeah, it's been really tough for everyone.
Oh yeah.
Paying attention and they want a really talented photographer and they're a really talented business person, perhaps you should contact Brent because I think he would like that marriage too. I know.
And honestly, more than one when it comes to business, I'm poly.
Yeah. Good to go. I know you work with a lot of fashion brands. I've worked with you. You're amazing. And you're the lead photographer for AFW, and you do such great work for everyone, and you get everything back so fast. You've been printed in multiple magazines, including Vogue Italia. How important do you feel for photography is to the fashion world? And in particular, how big is photography for brand visibility?
There's there's a debate even among photographers right now about what's more important, video or still photography. And video is the new shiny fast car that everybody wants to run with. And I will say an excellent video is better for visibility and market penetration and social media than a good photo. But there are a lot of bad videos. And and even there's a lot of good videos, but you have about 6 seconds to capture attention right now. And it used to be 30 seconds, and that's why TV commercials were 30 seconds. And then it got cut down to 15 seconds in the 90s and the 2000s. So 6 seconds has been sort of the benchmark for the last few years. And I read about a week or two ago that it's 3 seconds now. You want a 3 second hit on your video that captures people's attention. And that is hard to do.
Yeah.
I know from AFW, if we film all of AFW and we post the video, even if it's edited down so it's only like 20 seconds or 10 seconds per look with motion sweeps and stuff, so it's really decent production value, the view through we get to the end is less than 5% of people go right to the end, which sucks because usually fashion shows are set up so that the important headliners are at the end. And you'll get people watching the first 10, 20, 30 looks, get bored, want to go over, see something on Instagram, and they don't come back. But the interesting thing about photos, if you post an individual photo of every look from AFW, the push through you get of people who will click through to the end is significantly higher. It's like 30 or 40%. And it's because people have a super short attention span, but their attention span resets when they take an action. So when you're watching a video, it's entirely passive and you're sitting there and you're zoned out. And as tiny an action as it is when you post your pictures on Facebook or when you post them somewhere, and this is why I rarely use slideshows. If they have to click, they will click. And if they have a good connection and more people are getting really, really fast connections, they can click as fast as they want right through those photos. So you might only get, and this is why I tell designers and models and everybody that we need to make an impactful photo, or your garment needs to have impact, or the lighting in the scene needs to grab people because you want the eyes to linger longer. But at least you're getting eyeballs on the product, and they'll click through 250 photos and they won't sit through 12 or 15 looks on a video. And it's insane, the difference. But I think, and from the psychology studies I've read, it comes down to control, and people want to control what they're looking at. That's why people will swipe forever on Instagram. They see all those pictures. But if you press play on Instagram and there's a 2.5 minute movie, I don't even know if Instagram does 2.5 minute movies, but they'll almost never watch through the end. But they'll do this for hours. So the same principle applies to clicking, which means if you're creating a lookbook, if you're creating something impactful to try to get people to look at your brand, to try to draw people to your catalog so that they might actually buy something online, you want to have that super powerful photograph. And then this light is getting weird. Then you want to get good catalog shots with detail samples so that people can choose what they want to see. Oh, I really like that button or zipper detail or that, I don't know, print. So I want to zoom in on it. And if they can do all those things, or there's a sidebar, then it starts to allow the person to have active control, and they become a participant, an active participant in your messaging, in your brand. And that is so much more valuable to a brand than a passive person who's just not taking any part in it, except watching a screen. And the screen may be running, but the baby might be crying over there, or the cat might be puking over there, or something cool might be on TV, so they just get distracted and let it run. But if they're looking through, they're not going to keep doing this when they look away. So you know that every single one of those clicks is an eyeball on product. I'm old school, and I do not do video. And it's not that I don't like video. I think it's amazing. But I think it takes 15 to 25 years to get really good at something. And I've been doing this for 14 years. I hope that sometime in the next 10 years, I feel that I'm getting really good at it. But I'm certainly better than I used to be, and I know a lot more than I used to. And I want to see that through to the end. And there's so many people who do many, many things. And I've approached academics like that, where I tried to get a huge range of knowledge, but I know a little bit about a lot. But I could never be a scientist where you have to know everything about one tiny thing. But when it comes to photography, I flip that, and I try to be really, really good at a few things. I try to be really good at lighting, and I try to be really good at editorial location shooting, where I can find an iconic shot in a lot shorter period of time and on a smaller budget than most people can. Those two things translate really well to fashion photography. They transfer good to weddings. Quite honestly, my wedding shooting is pretty typical compared to most people, except for the 20 or 30 minutes that I get the bride and groom alone, and I treat it like a fashion shoot, and I go and I get them some iconic shots. And that's what I try to show sets me apart. And that's cool. A lot, it's fun. That's a fun part of photography. So video, important, useful, but I still think photography is more so.
Yeah, really good.
That's debatable.
Yeah, debatable, but it makes so much sense. The attention span is almost nothing these days. So giving them that control to just click, it makes all the sense. I know that's how I am. I almost never watch a full video. Like, as you were saying it, I was like, I'm a scroller, I'm a clicker. Like I identify with that for sure.
It's odd, but even like Netflix and scripted entertainment, I want to say television, but film and everything, are starting to, like, and you can see it most in the Marvel movies, where they have to have an incident every like 120 seconds. Something has to pop on the screen. There's no time for those slow burn dramatic movies anymore. And if you go back and you watch movies from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, now we've seen some of the iconic ones, we all know them and love them, but if you go watch some of the ones that you're not familiar with, the pacing, never mind what the story is about, and you can watch anything you want, from a horror movie to a detective thing to whatever, but the pacing is entirely different, and it feels extremely slow. Even the lines of dialogue, there's greater pauses between them. There's things that are just feel like, oh, that could have been edited, in everything. And some of these things are Academy Award-winning movies, and they were excellent in their time. But we've moved on from that because of our attention span. And probably internet speeds are affecting that, yeah. I guess.
The patience level was very different in those days.
Well, and they didn't have an alternative. They hadn't experienced the speed. I remember when a show like The West Wing, or anything Aaron Sorkin wrote in the like 90s and 2000s, felt like you were being bombarded by dialogue because everything was so fast. But I mean, we're watching The Boys now on TV, and it's just still a super fast dialogue. Everything's gone that way.
Yeah. So focus on the speed of things and how people have no attention. You gotta get.
Yeah. I've got a sunbeam just like.
I know, it's like a ray of light, Brent. Do you have any tips for our viewers today that you've learned over your amazing career that you simply should never do as a photographer? Like, do not do this.
Yeah. Don't touch your models. And I'm talking to the guys out there who are young and who want to adjust something on their model. And I'm talking to the portrait photographers out there who've been doing this for 35 years. Stop it. Yeah. The world has changed, okay? Like, seriously. And I know that you're doing it because the models feel uncomfortable. And I know that they feel uncomfortable because after you do it, they come home and they write to me. Mm-hmm. I get reports of this all the time. And I'm talking pre-COVID. 4 or 5 a month about all kinds of different photographers. Most of them not meaning anything, but it's still inappropriate.
Yeah.
Do not touch your models, and don't try to date your models either.
Right. Can we just pause to appreciate that comment, because it's extremely important, and I've come across a lot of that as well. It's so crucial for everyone to learn to ask them to move themselves. Hands off. You're taking a photo. You are not touching these models. Thank you for saying that, Brent. Actually, that's extremely important.
Have an assistant, a female assistant if you're working with female models, um, who they feel comfortable with. And if you need a garment adjusted, have them do it.
Yeah.
There's a model in the community who's pretty much my best friend, and I've worked with her more than any other model. I've shot her 60, 70 times. We hang out. Like, I've played with her children. We are good friends. She does circus. If I see her on the street, sometimes she'll run up to me and I'll try to do a circus lift, because I've never successfully done it, and I'll keep trying until the day I die. But or she just crushes me because I'm old and enfeebled. But in the studio, even though we'll like chest bump when we're at a bar, I don't touch her. Like, just no, it's just not professional, and it's not wise for anybody's career. And I'm really adamant about this right now, because it's come up a lot in the last month or two. And there's been an incident at one of the local schools where a student was removed from the program for untoward activity towards models.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary out there. It really is scary. And I always tell models, don't go to a shoot alone, so, and yeah, don't date the photographer either. That goes both ways. So keep each other professional.
To be fair, if a 20-year-old girl and a 20-year-old guy meet on a photo shoot, they can date, but don't try to do the date on the photo shoot.
Right.
Let all the business stuff finish, and then message them later. If the model's interested in the photographer, she can message the photographer days or weeks later and say, hey, it was really nice meeting you on the photo shoot, but I was wondering if you'd like to hang out in a more social way. That's an entirely reasonable approach. But don't try to, hey, if you want a photo shoot, also you have to come and hang out with me. That's not cool.
Oh,
like, it's not like a super strict rule. We're not in sort of such an environment where people can't associate, can't be friends, can't hang out, but it shouldn't be predicated on the business, and it should be separate from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I married a model, so there's not like saying we can't do things. But we met at a party that had nothing to do with photography, and I didn't photograph Sarah after we started dating for almost a year.
You got to keep your stuff separate.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, so this is what not to do. So on the flip side, do you have some advice of what new photographers should absolutely start doing immediately that they might not think of, or that they may not have been told?
There's two things. One, and they sound like they contradict. First, do it a lot. You need to be doing the photography like every 3 or 4 days at least, if you're serious about it. Just trying to get myself some shade and some light. And the second thing is, don't do it very much. Leave the photography behind. There's two problems I see with new people who want to get into photography. And the first are the people who get into photography and want to be good at it right away. And that's just not going to happen. Quite reasonably, you're going to suck for a long time. And it's the same as if someone handed you a violin and you never played a violin before. You're not going to be a world-class fiddle player in 6 months. You're just not. It takes a lot of effort. Now, you might accidentally make a great photo, and more, everyone is making some great photos. They have their smartphone, they have a camera on them all the time. Something interesting happens, the light happens to be good. That's awesome. but that's not a good photographer. That is good awareness. Nice time you click the shutter, but can you make a really great photo when nothing's working?
Mhm.
That's the hard thing. So don't mistake the fact that you've made a couple good photos for the fact that you are a good photographer. But the other thing is, some people get so obsessed by photography that it's the only thing they want to do, and then they're on the internet when they're not out shooting, and they're looking at which lens is the best, and they're they get super intense about photography. And the problem is they get so bogged down in the technical side and what's right and what are the rules, and that they lose the creative side. They lose the ability to disengage, and the creative mind doesn't work when you're demanding it to work. Very often the creative mind works when it's distracted. And there's some neuron connections that happen when you're not focused that don't happen when you are. It's why something could be on the tip of your tongue, but you just can't pull it out. But then you're like, 5 or 10 minutes later, you've gone off and made some toast, and you're like, oh, right, it's that thing. It's because your brain has got distracted, and it's allowed the connections, the synapses, and the neurons to fire in the right way. Creativity happens like that. So I used to teach a seminar, sort of a TED Talk without the TED part. And it was how to be good at photography by being lazy and fucking up.
Yeah.
And the point was that, yeah, do photography, try your best to learn and get better, but also take time to live life, read books, read magazines that have nothing to do with photography, go for walks, scuba dive, play board games with your family, do other things. And I guarantee you, while you're doing those other things, ideas will come.
Yeah.
Happen. You could be on vacation with your family, no camera around, and you can just see a beautiful moment. And you're like, that is gorgeous. Now, if you had a camera, maybe you'd fire and focus and take what you get. Maybe if you don't have the camera, you remember that moment and then you create it. Now, if you can create that moment, that's a different type of photography. You're not just, and I don't mean to say just as in a diminutive way, but you're not just recording it and documenting something that happened, but you're creating a vision, you're creating a story. And I think that dovetails nicely with the most important thing for me about everything about photography. It's no longer about what lenses are best. It's no longer about which light modifiers work better. It's what story are you telling? Tell me a good story. Engage me. I don't I don't care about much else. There needs to be something. And a story can be like a big, long, detailed thing, or it can be evoking an emotion, changing my perspective, challenging me, making me angry, making me laugh. Any of those things deal with story, and I want that so badly. I'm just wondering if this shirt is, yeah, anyway. Yeah, there's way too much. I mean, I do 2 hours on what to do when you start, but
Yeah.
if you can keep focused enough to keep doing it to see gradual improvement, but don't hyper focus so you burn out in 6 or 9 months.
Yeah, exactly. All in, but not all in every day.
There's a local photographer who I admire, and I think he's a great guy. Um, and quite honestly, he produced beautiful landscape work, and he's selling all his camera gear. He lasted about 5 or 6 years going hardcore, really doing it. Decided he loved it so much he was going to make it, like, make him make money. He dove in, had studio space, got everything, and now is going out of it. It was the hardcore dive in, and you can't sustain almost anything like that.
Yeah, it's hard. Like you'll eventually burn out if you're not taking time to do anything else.
And it's not eventually, it's pretty quick. Like in the grand scheme of things, if it takes 15 to 20 years to get really good at photography, just the number of people who put in those 15 or 20 years seriously is very minimal.
Yeah.
I mean, photography isn't super hard. Like it's not rocket surgery. But it does require a lot of experience and learning, mostly from trial and error or mentorship. And that takes time and takes doing. People really want to watch YouTube and get good at photography, and you can learn a lot, I guess, on YouTube, but you need to be out there doing it.
Yeah, that's how you know. Yeah, exactly. That's
I there was a point in time where I thought I was getting really good at landscape photography, and I thought I had it down, and I was ready to take it into my fashion world. and I was in Death Valley, and we were finished the shoot for the day, and we were packing up the vehicles, and I was the last person to put my camera case in the back of the SUV. And just as I was putting it down, somebody yelped, and we turned around, and there was a group of like 6 or 7 wild horses walking through this abandoned ghost town. Sun was setting, they were kicking up dust, light was coming through. Most amazing scene. Absolutely everybody had their gear already packed. I was the only person who could access their stuff quickly. So I went over, I popped open the stuff, I turned around, I walked over, I got in position, I had the camera set, I took the shot. It was an amazing shot. Like, without exaggeration, the scene was a world-class scene.
Yeah.
And had I put my memory card back in the camera,
Yeah.
would have been absolutely great. But I didn't. And I didn't realize that I was self-satisfied and thrilled with myself and patting myself on the back for about 5 minutes. Got in the back of the SUV, everybody's like, oh, at least somebody got it, oh, it's great. And then I popped open, hit review on the camera, and there was my shots that I'd done before, and there was nothing. And I'm like, okay, because the camera had like, I think a 5 shot memory, and then there's like 5, and I'm like, oh my God. It was a dusty environment, so I'd taken the cards out and put them in their kit, and That's happened to me a number of times.
Oh, that's the worst.
Yeah. Needless to say, I put another couple years in the landscape before I felt comfortable again.
How do you get clients to book you? Like, I know you work for a lot of big people in Halifax. How did you get your name out there to be the professional guy that people come to?
I do the work and people put it up and people see it. I'm terrible at advertising. I don't feel that something that is as subjective as artwork should be bragged about by the person who makes it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm the worst person to brag about my work because I know everything that's wrong with it. And I'm like, I don't like that. People might say, oh, that's a wonderful photo. And my brain says, yeah, but I know I should have done whatever.
Yeah, you're your worst critic.
Yeah, and also I find it really, really off-putting when photographers are like, look at this amazing shoot. I'm like, I want to judge. I'm the viewer. You have an MP3 player probably somewhere in your possession. And there's a collection of songs on that MP3 player. And they are the best songs for you. But if you handed that to me and said, listen to these 50 songs, they're the best, I'm probably not going to agree with all of those. And I guarantee you wouldn't agree with all of mine. And photography is not that much different. We all have different tastes. We all have different aesthetics. So if you look at what I do and you like it, contact me.
Yeah.
But I am very, very bad at and disdainful of people who go out and knock on doors and say, hey, shoot with me. Now, that's not saying every photographer watching this shouldn't be doing that, because you probably should. I can't do it. I've even been told by some amazing mentors that I need to do that more. And I kind of realistically know I need to, but I don't like doing it. And I'm not good at it. And I think I turn as many people off as I do get clients. So I think my work is, at least in Halifax, reasonably well known. And for weddings, it's a little different. It's a one-off thing that you need to contact people. So in the wedding world, I feel a little different. And there's wedding shows you book and you go to, you put your stuff up. Brides walk by. It's really easy. So I don't know. Hopefully, after COVID, people still know who all of us are, but they might not.
Yeah.
So it might be starting over from scratch, trying to find people who know who you are.
But word of mouth is good, because then you're getting people that you're kind of like pre-vetted. Like, you're getting more of the people that already appreciate what you're doing. So I kind of like the idea of word of mouth too. So how do you stay organized? Because all of your shoots, there are hundreds and thousands of photos, and I'm sure you've collected a lot over the years. So how do you stay organized? Are there any tips that you have to help new people to start getting organized so they're not dealing with this slump later?
Um, if you mean after the fact rather than like organizing shoots, it's a digital management universe, and there's a couple things that I found that help me. But dirty secret for most photographers are unorganized, disorganized. What I do is I start a new hard drive, a little 2 terabyte hard drive every year.
Okay.
So end of December, usually after Christmas, sales are on, so I'll go and buy a hard drive or two. I used to do that. I have a bunch just sitting in wrappers right now because I buy them when they're on sale. I buy the tough ones that can drop and not sustain damage, and I wrap some tape around it, and I write 2018, 2019 on it. And I do all my shooting to that.
Okay.
Um, my last 8 or 10 shoots, depending on how big they are sitting on the computer. Everything is uploaded to the cloud once it's done. So it's saved on the cloud, it's saved on that little portable hard drive, and then I have a big, expensive, that most people shouldn't bother buying, hard drive array of like 32 terabytes that I'll back everything up to as well, occasionally. And that's like, oh, I haven't done this for 4 months, so now I'm going to sit down and back everything up. Pain in the ass type thing.
Yeah.
But I generally have recent shoots in 3 places and very, very old shoots in 3 places. And medium distance shoots are in at least 2 places, one of them being on a cloud and one on a hard drive that's no more than a few months old. So the failure rate is very low. Now, if I'm doing a big commercial shoot where the money is um, significant, or if I'm doing a shoot where the files, I couldn't go back into the studio and do it again if I absolutely had to, um, and this includes weddings. I have 2 drives. So I have my 2019, 2020, whatever drive, but then I also have an important file drive. And if your photos make it to the important file drive, that's just an extra set of redundancy if that one drive happens to fail and if the cloud fails simultaneously, then I have it in the third place. And that's before it gets backed up to, so everything I have is usually in 4 places. Um, that's overkill. That is overkill. If you have a cloud account and you get all your full-size JPEGs, you don't even necessarily have to put the RAWs up, but even just your full-size JPEGs up onto a cloud and somewhere in your physical presence. That's probably good enough. When I used to have the studio, one set of drives was at the studio and one set of drives was at home, so that if there was a fire, I wouldn't lose everything. Now everything is pretty much here. I should have the array offsite, but I just don't have anywhere to put it. I could put it at Sarah's parents' house, but quite honestly, I'm more certain it won't get spilled on or moved or something weird happening to it here because I know what it is. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's a lot.
But twin drives, never just have something on your computer. The most nervous I am on shoots is when we finish a shoot and it's been a location shoot, so I've just shot to the camera and I've yet to download the files. And I don't think you and I have done this yet, but if we've ever done a shoot and gone out to eat afterwards, you will often see me take the memory cards out of the camera and put them in my pocket on the off chance that while we're sitting in Montana's or Freeman's, someone breaks into my car and steals the cameras. That's the like epitome of paranoid. But I know someday it will happen to some photographer, and I just don't want it to be me. My gear is insured, but the pictures are not.
Right. Replaceable. Yeah, you can't go do that all again.
Yeah.
Protecting us, Brent. Thank you. And you save everything? Everything you've ever created, you save? Or do you get rid of stuff eventually?
No. I have done in the past, but back when hard drive space was a lot more expensive,
Yeah.
and when my shoots were overtly terrible and useful to no one. No, I mean like they were just learning shoots for me. They weren't particularly flattering to the model, so those get deleted. And I have and still will delete stuff when models ask me to. Like it's an unusual but not rare occurrence for a model to do something sexy something goofy, something gory, whatever, and then meet a new boy who doesn't like it, find religion that doesn't like it, just change on her own and feel regretful of it. And as a photographer with a model release, I have no obligation legally to delete those photos. But as a human being with morals, I'm like, you know what? That's fine. If you don't want those up, I'll take them down. I don't. I don't want the photography that I do to cause anybody anxiety
Yeah.
or worry. Um, there's not much I can do if it was a commercial shot and it was like on billboards or something. Sorry, that's already out there. That's gone. I'll delete mine, but it's not going to help you because you can Google that stuff forever. Um, which is a good lesson for any models who, or the model who might watch this. Um, don't shoot anything you wouldn't be proud to show your granddaughter.
Right.
Because our grandkids are going to be able to search everything we did by facial recognition.
Way fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary. Stop talking. What do you do when you're at an event and you're the photographer and there's other people that you might have to organize yourself around? Like if there's videographers or models or other people buzzing around. How do you organize and claim the space you need? And how do you convey those messages in those moments?
Well, it depends on what the event's focus is. Their attitude towards photography and video is often uh, different than mine. Um, but it's if other than AFW, where I do what I want to do because I'm the guy who's organizing it. But even then, I try to give everybody a sight line, and I try to give the people who are supposed to be there and supposed to be shooting a good option to shoot. Now, there's usually in the past like 4 years or so, there's been 4 or 5 of us shooting it, and I will position a student or somebody right at the back of the stage, and the only shots they're going to get is a silhouette shot. But I'm like, you're only going to get one shot today, but it's going to be an amazing shot. And tomorrow you can be out here or whatever, but I need that shot. That's going to be an amazing shot. And when it's not there, here's a couple other things to try. Shoot the shoes of the people in the crowd if there's something cool, whatever. But I try to cover 5 or 6 different angles. And there's usually 2 people shooting every look. So if my camera blows up and I have to go switch, if I'm at an event where I'm not running, if I haven't, I will work with whatever the event tells me, and oftentimes they'd have no clue. Like when you're shooting in New York, you get no special treatment. You sit in a pit and people elbow you in the face. I've actually had my nose bloodied by another photographer who just elbowed me in the face on purpose.
Wow.
And in that case, it's just like you take your t-shirt, you go like this, and you keep shooting. There's no sense getting into a fight in the pit because I'm nobody. They're probably somebody bigger than I am. I'm going to lose that no matter what. So you just ignore it. You keep working, and you're in the worst possible spot, and you're sitting on the edge like this. Oh well, that's what you get. If it's an event, we had an event recently where I was told you were going to be here, and I'm like, okay, this will work. And I say recently, pre-COVID, and then things changed and they said, no, you have to be over here. And I'm like, okay, but there's no shot here because there's no light. You're not going to see any of the garments. And they're like, oh, well, that's where you have to be. I'm like, okay, well, thank you. You're not paying me. Goodbye. And I left because there was no shot. It was a complete waste of my time to stay there. And they moved me to put video over on the other end. And I'm like, okay, if that's your focus, I'm not going to argue. I'm not here to tell you any different. But professionally, there isn't going to be a shot here. I'm here as a courtesy to you guys, but I can't do the work from here, so thanks. I'm going to call my wife and we're going to go to Freeman's and have dinner instead because it's a better use of my time.
And you were so professional about how you handled it because it was messed up, and the way you handled it was super professional, and kudos to you. People should be happy to go to Freeman's when they're not treated properly.
Well, it wasn't so much treated properly. It was just that they had a focus that didn't prioritize what I was going to be doing,
Yeah.
which is totally fair. I'm not the be all and end all of anything. They are more focused on video. Cool beans. But if I have got zero light on subjects, and if I mean, I also saw a safety hazard happening. Um, Addressed it with the people who were doing it. They dismissed it as ridiculous, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be here if this is going to happen. Um, and no one died, so it didn't.
Right.
But
Luckily.
it was a significant hazard.
Yeah.
It wasn't nitpicking. So anyway, I, it's funny that events treat photographers like the event is doing them a favor. Um, and to sometimes, sometimes the event will do you a favor if it's a high-end event and it lets in a photographer who hasn't got a lot of experience. And I've been that guy many times in LA and New York and London who, by my skill level, I had no business being there, but they were being kind, and I'm just like, I'll stay anywhere. It doesn't matter. Um, but if you're a new event and you've got an experienced fashion photographer who's willing to shoot your work just to support the community, don't stick them in the corner with no light and a background that looks terrible, because
Yeah.
it's not gonna. It's you're not gonna get anything from it. It's not worth anybody's time.
No.
So,
Yeah.
and I've done it so many times where I sat there and I shot it and tried to be, oh well, and then you sit at home and you spend like 10 minutes on each photo trying to do the adjustments to bring everything back up, and it's a 3 or 4 day job just trying to get photos that aren't good to look passable.
Right. Not worth it.
No, and it might seem a little bit like egotistical or something to just say no, I'm not going to do that, but it's not good to have mediocre photography out there. It's not good for me. It's not good for the model. It's not good for the designer. So in that way, the most ethical and the best advice I can give is don't do it.
Right.
And occasionally I will take my own advice and move along.
That's really good advice to new photographers as well. That take the opportunities you can get, but know when to say no. Know when you're not going to give yourself or them any value, and it's time to walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's pretend you're just starting out and you're just building your kit. What would you say is some of the equipment, or even like just gear, tools, apps, things that you would recommend somebody start off with, that this would be a good place to start?
When you're very first beginning photography, get the cheapest 50 millimeter lens you can find that has autofocus. Um, Canon has a 50 f1.8 that's probably about $100 right now. It's called the Nifty 50 or the Fantastic Plastic because its build quality is absolute shite. But it delivers a really decent picture around f2.2 and above. Walk around with that lens on your camera for at least 3 months and only take photos at 50 millimeters. 50 millimeters is approximately what the eye sees. Compression-wise, field of view will differ between crop sensors and full frame, but it doesn't matter. Use the 50 millimeter. Frame your shots. Learn how to shoot there. We have 3 principal variables when we're doing photography. We have aperture, we have shutter speed, and we have ISO or film sensitivity. And 3 times 3 times 3 is 9 variables. Plus you add in focal length. But if you're using a 70 to 200, each one of those numbers is a variable. Am I shooting at 70? Am I shooting at 75, 80, 85, 200, 190? That's 130 extra variables times 9 that you're adding. That's insane. And people get so tied up in the zoom that everything else goes away.
Yeah.
Learn how to work the camera and get exposure right with a 50 millimeter lens on. Learn how to see and compose shots that fit in that. And then, if you get a 24 to 70 and a 70 to 200 f2.8 lenses, you will have them for 20 years and they will do 95% of everything you need to do in commercial photography.
Yeah.
Everybody lusts after an 85. It's a good lens. You don't need it. if your best shots are all shot at f2 or f1.2, you're using nice blurry buttery bouquet as a crutch. You're not a good photographer. You just know what a pretty subject is.
Right.
And it happens. It happened to me. I did it for a couple of years. Everybody does it.
Yeah.
They think that that makes them a great photographer because their gear can isolate a subject.
Right.
How many of my shots that you can remember that have impressed you in some way have an ultra blurry background?
0.
Right, right. I hang out at f11 a lot
Yeah.
because it's about the story. It's not about the gear.
Right. It's all
Right.
about the story. Yeah. That's all. Yeah, exactly.
The other thing is you asked about apps. Get a light meter app. I'm just going to see what mine's called. It might just be called literally light meter because it's one of the early ones. But pocket light meter. I don't know if you can see that, but
no, it's green screening out.
oh, wonderfully. Anyway, I have pocket light meter. It was, I think, $3.99 on the iPhone 3, and I've just brought it through. It's been updated enough to work on mine. It is within a third of a stop of my Sekonic $750 light meter. I almost never bring my light meter on jobs anymore because the one in my iPhone is as good.
Wow. That's
Yeah. If you used to be part of Fashion Week like 8-9 years ago, you'd see me walking the runway with my light meter. Now I walk it with my iPhone.
But now I know. That's why you're going through the thing with your phone. How do you describe your photography style? And is it important for you to develop your own style as a photographer, or should you just always be doing what the people tell you?
There are two schools of thought on this, and I lean towards one school of thought, and I practice the other school of thought. I am a generalist. I feel that I can light and shoot almost anything. I'm not particularly good at babies. I'm not particularly good at food shots. There are people who spend a lot more time than I do doing those two things who are better at them. But I can light almost anything, except myself at the beginning of this video, getting attacked by the sun. But my style, I don't have a style. I have styles. I'm pretty sure in the Renaissance and in more recent painting art, fine artists go through phases. You know, the blue phase and the red phase. If I get caught on something, I'll start a series or I'll start a style. And when I did the Hollywood series, I spent like almost a year shooting old school Hollywood portraits, and I loved that. It's just a technique that interests me. That's not done anymore, and I got the old gear and I did it the old ways, not the digital ways, not the fast ways. So that wasn't really a style; it was an exploration of a style. Classic Renaissance portraits, the same thing. I went from being the leading edge of the 1950s to the leading edge of the 1850s, and did Renaissance portraits for a number of years and loved them. But that isn't my style. It's just, I didn't create that. I didn't create Hollywood style. I just wanted to learn how to do it. My style tends to be a little darker, tends to be a little bit ironic or political or sexually empowered, where the female character appears strong. If she's going to look sexy, she's going to be in the dominant position, the superhero position. I don't frequently shoot demure, or like if I'm going to bring the feminine into my photos, and was not a conscious thing. It's only recently been pointed out to me that a lot of times my female characters are power characters. And someone called it the Buffy the Vampire Slayer look, and I'm like, okay, I'm cool with that. But yeah, outside my style is sweeping. I like landscapes, as we talked about, and I like to shoot long, so I like to be further away from the subject and use compression. There are people who like to get right up in the faces of their subjects, and it's a cool style. I love it, and I do it occasionally, but I just find myself usually standing off, not interfering with the subject, and trying to place the subject in a context or a story that will be relatable to somebody else in the future. Or I do creepy stuff, which there's a local designer, Kim Munson of Orphanage, who her and I probably share, or she shares with me, or I share with her the closest aesthetic of what, whenever she describes something that she wants to do, I'm like, oh my God, yes, please. And oftentimes when I pitch her something, she's like, oh yeah, let's do that. And it's ironic, but in the last like 3 or 4 years, added to the dark and creepy has been the uber glitter. The more glitter, the better. The more gay, the better. The more fabulous and extraordinarily happy. I just love that. My wife and I have spent so much time watching everything we can about drag and the community, and I used to be into burlesque, and those two worlds sort of conjoined to be irreverent and fun, political, and almost everything that I like.
Yeah.
So if we can hit some of those check boxes, I am all in on it.
So fun. Do you have a piece of advice that someone gave you or that you came up with on your own that was kind of one of the biggest things, best pieces of advice you still carry with you today?
Yeah. This isn't just for photography, it's for life. And it's one of those things that I often do not succeed in practicing, but that the times that I do succeed in executing it, it is beneficial. And it's said in a way, it was said to me in the 1970s when I was just a wee little boy. And it sounds, it's out of date now, but I'll say it how I was told it. Don't talk to crazy. And this is mostly now useful for the internet. You can't convince or change someone's mind who isn't thinking rationally.
Right.
Whether it's because of anger or insane devotion to a belief or politic or something like that. Arguing with them is pointless. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help them. So if you can avoid doing that, you will be a happier person in the long run. The caveat to that is, if you have an audience, which you often do on the internet, then don't talk to the crazy. I mean, you can use them as your foil and it will look like you're engaging with them, but you're really talking to the people who can learn or who can listen. Yeah. So if you find yourself that you have to engage with somebody, do so in a way that will be beneficial to the undecided or the uninformed who may be watching. And it seems that I get in internet arguments very frequently, especially about Donald Trump, because I don't like him. But if you read most of what I do, if it's ongoing, if it's an extended engagement, the person I'm arguing with is not the person I'm talking to. I'm talking to everybody else. And I think in photography, if you can avoid getting obsessed and talking to the people who are obsessed about any particular thing, it will help you. There are innumerable arguments about what lens is better, what camera brand is better, whether or not a crop frame sensor makes your lens longer. It doesn't, but there are people who believe it does, who I've argued with. It's not worth it. Move along and enjoy life a little bit more.
Yeah. Amen.
From photography, if you want a piece of advice from photography specifically, it would be know why you're pushing the button. If you're going to be a photographer and you're going to push a button, there needs to be a reason why you're doing it. And it can't just be to push the button. That's not an answer. So if the sun is setting and you're taking a sunset shot and you're about to push the button. Why are you pushing it right now? Is this the right moment? And if you don't know, if you set up and you have an hour-long sunset and you push the button every second for an hour, you don't know why you're pushing it. You're just going to keep pushing it. It'll get dark, and then you'll go look on a computer. You're not a photographer. You're a digital recorder and an editor at that point. So know why you're pushing the button. And it's hard. It sounds pedantic and simple. But if someone, I do a lot of photo reviews for young photographers, and I'll often ask them, why did you take this picture? And if you can't answer that like that, what are we supposed to get from it as a viewer if you don't know why you took the picture?
Yeah.
Like, and it's incredible how many people cannot describe that, cannot answer that question.
Yeah, it's true.
I can answer it about almost everything I take. And sometimes it's as simple as because they're paying me to.
But you know.
Yeah, this is not what I would do, but this will help. And you know, like, let's take something. One of the most boring things for a photographer to do is a commercial shoot on white. It's something we learn very early. Now, that being said, it's simple, it's easy, we learn it early. It's also one of the most valuable things we do for clients because they use those catalog shots to sell their product. Yes, it can get boring, but why am I doing it? So that this client can be successful, reach out, show their product in the most flattering way, in the most revealing way, so that their potential clients, can see it and purchase it. And that client becomes sustainable, and hopefully I'll get more work.
Yeah.
Because if they're successful and sell X amount of product, they'll do another line, and they'll come back here. That's why I'm shooting this boring thing and why I'm doing it well, because it's still important.
Yeah. That's good advice. You're full of good advice, Brent. You're full of it.
I am full of it. You said it.
What is up next for you in AlterEgo photography? Have we retired?
Yeah, I retired in 2007. Photography is my retirement. You laugh. I'm not joking. What is next for me is probably a shoot for the Hair Design Center makeup grad class, which is coming up. But in a big scale thing, it's wait and see what happens with COVID.
Yeah.
I am a diabetic and I'm overweight, and it's not a really good idea for me to be in large crowds if our numbers are up. Again, I am uber thankful that I live in Nova Scotia. Prime Minister who has seen that at least those not eligible for unemployment are still getting some funding from the government, and that's going to make a bunch of people unhappy, but I don't care because I need the money. We are in a good spot compared to our brothers and sisters in Ontario and Quebec and BC and pretty much everywhere outside of the Atlantic bubble. We are in an amazing spot compared to our cousins in the United States. I can't travel to Europe as of yesterday. Most of Europe is shut off to me. So I was talking to one of my clients about doing a shoot. It looks like that's not going to happen now, which was going to be in January or February. But that's the life, right? Like, stuff comes and goes. I can't do the wedding stuff this year, so I tried to focus on, what market can I go to? Well, Canadians are allowed to travel to Europe. Cool. Nope, as of yesterday. So who knows? I wanna build a garage because right now I'm paying for a storage unit with all my gear in it from the studio, and I'd like to not pay $600 a month to somebody else. I'd rather just have a garage where I can store all my stuff. That's what's next for AlterEgo.
Oh, that's valid. We're stuck here. We don't know what COVID's going to do. We don't. And so many people are in the same position you're in. So I like that you're just focusing on what you can do. I can build a garage. I can't, so that's it.
Yeah. I just did a portfolio shoot for a billiards pool player, like a sort of I don't know if he's semi-pro, but a really good local pool player who wanted new social media stuff. And we got to have an entire dualies all to ourselves for about 3 hours, and I got to go light a pool bar, which was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really fun.
Yeah, and as I was shooting it, I'm like, oh my god, I wish we had a couple of like models here, because this is perfect. It would have been perfect for a pretty stylized fashion or editorial shoot, and I didn't think it was going to look as good as it did. Like I went and scouted the dualies, but I scouted it with all the lights on, and it was like, it was, you know, it's a dualies. It's a very clean, good looking, but fairly sterile looking pool hall. And in my mind, I was like, I want like old band posters on the wall and smoke and like traditional 1980s pool hall. But when we turned all the lights off and we just had spot lights on tables and I put my lighting in, it was like, could have used this.
You know, you could have had anybody there in 10 minutes.
Yeah. I don't think so, because it was a Sunday morning.
Oh, right. A little early. So, if you were dropped off, you had all the knowledge that you have right now, but you had to start over completely as a photographer, what would be your very first thing that you would do?
That's a tough question. It depends on my age. If it was now, it's a different question. If I'm like late 40s, or if I was young. If I were young, and this is going to seem silly, but I would learn to paint.
Oh, surprising.
I have never met a talented painter who has then come into photography who hasn't been good at photography.
Oh, wow.
Because when you learn to paint, you learn to understand light. And I think it's the link between painting and photography is similar to the link between mathematics and music. Maybe, I don't know. But there is a link. And I've bumped into people who've been shooting for 30 years, and I've looked at their work and I thought, this is stale and boring and terrible. And then I'll bump into someone and I'm like, this is amazing. How long have you been doing photography? And they'll say, oh, 3 years. I'm like, what? How? And not every time, but often enough to make me go, oh, this is a thing. It'll turn out that they were a painter.
Wow.
And if you want to do commercial photography purely, the other thing to get into would be graphic design.
Yeah.
Learn the elements of graphic design and it will really help your photography.
Yeah.
Because someone quite wise once said, photography is not rocket surgery. And it's not. But getting good at it requires elements that are not necessarily obvious in the photography world.
Right.
You need to draw on something outside of that. And those two fields, I think, are two of the best fields to get in. Now, the other thing is get in from marketing and just be passable at photography and market the heck out of yourself, and you'll make money.
Yeah.
Your photography will not be that good, but you'll make money.
Yeah.
And it's a completely reasonable approach and a more profitable approach than mine, like,
right.
Without question.
Makes sense. Well, thank you so much to Brent McCombs from AlterEgo Photography for being with us today. And thank you to everyone for coming and watching us on the East Coast Fashion Summit. I hope everyone got as much value as I did today. Brent, thank you. That was amazing. Lots of great advice. I appreciate you. Thanks again for doing this.
You're welcome. Let's do it again next week.
Okay.